Hey y'all, how you doing? All right, well let me really do a little test and see what kind of people I'm working with here. Y'all ready for your first kink test? All right, so I believe everyone has a kink gene in it because we are all made pretty much out of the same mold. But do you remember when you had a loose tooth? You remember that loose tooth and you would wiggle it with your tongue all the time, play with it? Come on, raise your hands. That loose tooth, you kept playing with it. It hurt, but you kept doing it anyway, right? You're all kinky. And let me tell you why. Because you got an endorphin rush. It was pain, but it was followed by pleasure. Because when your body responds to pain, it gets an endorphin hit. And there's pleasure that follows it. That's why you kept doing it, because it felt good. So now that I know I'm working with my people, and y'all will get me and y'all will understand me, let me tell you some more stories and why I got involved in this work. So our topic is sexual transmutation, and really it was about learning about the power of sexuality and just the thoughts to motivate myself as a young woman. And my first orgasm happened at the age of 5. And I was a kid living in Okinawa, an Asian country, and I came across a 12 by 12 cinder block room. It had, when I walked in and peeked my head in, I was riding my bicycle in the jungle, it had rings on each of the walls at waist level, and then a ring on the ceiling, and then one on the floor. And I didn't know what it was, but it started to rain, or at least that's the excuse I say for why I walked into the room. And when I looked behind me, on the walls behind me, there were these beautiful images of naked women in bondage. And I went, oh, ooh. And I could feel something aroused within me. And it woke up something. It was the experience of learning something new, seeing some beauty, and arousal at the same time. And that became my fetish of learning something new, especially about our bodies and ourselves. And that fed my lifelong interest in sexuality. And from that point on, it was like, forget Santa Claus, this is good stuff now. And I went from there, and I was lucky because my parents were big readers. And so we had Masters and Johnson and Alfred Kinsey reports in our home, which was really in the 60s, the late 60s when those came out. And my dad had his Playboys under his right side of the bed, so I could look at it and go, ooh, that's what I'm going to look like when I grow up. So I was like, oh, wow, cool. And then I went to the bathroom to discover I have all these extra parts. I have all these holes, and they felt good. So we turned on the water faucet, and it was my hallelujah moment. That was that first orgasm that came into being, and I was like, wow, this is what being an adult is like, and this is life. But it shifted for me. It was all of a sudden there's a whole nother world out there, and then again, Santa Claus didn't matter anymore. This was a different world. And so from there, I was about discovering and going, what else is there out there? So in the 80s, I came across the book from Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich. Now, he was an author and a researcher who in 1937, he wrote this book after interviewing 40 of the most richest Americans at the time and understood what they had to say about how they got to their wealth. And there's the book. You see the book here? Vanna Black over here, or Vannard Black, or Vannard White. You could be Vannard White. Oh, that's an American reference for, never mind. Right. The pretty show girl, show guy, all right. And in his research, in chapter 11, which is the famous chapter about sexual transmutation, he talks about and says, and one of the quotes I really like from him is, whatever the mind can conceive and believe it can achieve. And his focus was on really changing the mind. And I will tell you that if you are only operating from our logical left brain or the masculine mindset, you're only using half your brain. And it's when you cross over and use both sides of your hemisphere, which is known as the creative, the right side. And I can see it in your faces. When you look at the lines across your face, squint your faces in the mirror and check out the lines. You'll notice that you'll have lines on the right side that go across and on the left side. But when they go across from right to left hemisphere, that means you have learned connectivity and learning a subject deeply on both the left and the right side of your brain. So we all have lines. The more lines, the more intelligence, or the more you've learned in one particular subject area. But using that right side of the brain is really connecting into the creativity. And that takes a different process. It's not book learning. It's not studying hard. It is another process and another path. So Napoleon said, sexual transmutation is simple and easy to understand. Now, I'm going to tell you a little differently. And he said, switching off the mind from thoughts of physical expression to thoughts of other desires or dreams is the basics of it. Remembering that sex desire is the strongest desires after life. Remember, that breathing is probably that natural thing that comes from us originally. And then finally, the starting point of all achievement is desire. Desire, that's an emotion, that's an instinctual experience that our bodies have, whether we are conscious of them or not. So we've got to pay attention to that. Now, that's all he tells us. That's it. And we have to figure out the rest of this. And I want to go, yeah, it is kind of simple. That kind of started me in researching, though. I went, okay, dude, I know a lot about sex by the time I was in the 80s, but I didn't know anything about business. And so I was, well, how can I merge these two? Where does this information come to me? And how do I go from pleasure to profit? So I answered and did the research and said, well, what is sexual transmutation? And it really is the ability to take sexual energy and transform it and reutilize it to affect emotional, mental, and or spiritual efforts. So on the right, I've got a little diagram that comes from the Taoist tradition and looking at an area called Tianjin. And it's really, Tianjin is the same as qi or organ or energy. It is taking the energy of our bodies. And when you're here in the East and you haven't gone to Chinese medicine or had your acupuncture treatments, go. Because there's a whole system of medicine that we in the West have not been exposed to that really will give you wisdom about these energies and how they flow in the body. Or go over to Dow Gardens in Dorsett and you can spend 2,000 baht for a massage and find out for yourself. But one of the things you'll learn from that is that they use these balls of energy. Now, I promised Peter and James I would not have any nude bodies on my picture. So the little heart here, you understand we are covering the necessary parts, which would be a necessary part. And I said that Peter meter is what I like to call it, is an important tool, and I'll get to that in a bit. But that original core energy, which is the most powerful energy we have as a species, it is procreation energy. It is fuel energy that starts from our core area, our root chakra, which is where that basis comes from, and then moves up the body. And we can do simple exercises to move this energy and take it up the body and call the microcosmic orbit and move this energy up the body and go around. Now that takes more than the 20 minutes I have to show you that, but there are other traditions on how this energy is moved throughout the body. And so this is simply taking this energy and finding ways to move it about. So that's what the Taoists have to say. I came up with another formula looking at the universal laws. And you've heard of the law of attraction, which The Secret, the movie in the West, talked very well about it, but didn't give you the whole story. And the law of attraction is basically like attracts like. We often have believed it to be whatever you want, you can attract to yourself, but it doesn't work that way. You really have to be in a space of either appreciation, gratitude is the energy that attracts. So if you have a negative energy, you will attract negativity. If you're worried, you'll have a reason to worry because you'll attract that to you. So controlling your thoughts is a really critical stage of this before you engage in going any further. Plus the law of action. Now, I hope you cannot read the fine print, because that's the real point of this. And that was the one I'm going to say, make a note of the fine print, which simply says you have to hold a thought for 17 seconds. Couple that, having a thought. We're attracting something with a thought. Holding that thought for 17 seconds, plus adding that orgasmic sexual energy with it. That's the action that we are taking with our thoughts. Now, again, it sounds simple. However, dogs have better concentration skills than humans do. We have 4 to 6 seconds. Animals have longer than that. So for us to be able to hold a thought for 17 seconds is difficult. It takes that meditative process and focus, which we don't normally have, and particularly when we're sexually active. We are not thinking about holding a thought. And that's the practice it takes. Now, there's another rule, and this is taught in neuro-linguistic programming. Neuro the mind, linguistic language programming, reprogramming the mind with language. By simply saying in multiples of 17, particularly 4, you can manifest things much quicker because you are reprogramming your mind to bring these things about. Plus the law of action. So it does take these two elements to bring together. And I have found the fastest way of doing that is doing with something I enjoy doing, and that is having an orgasm. Right? It's better than typing or making 40 phone calls anyway to do stuff. So another source to check out is the 12 immutable universal laws. So make sure you look those up when you get a chance to. So let's go on and let's get into all right, well, how do I visualize? Well, again, it's a right brain focus. It is the daydreaming we did as kids when we had the freedom and we did not have responsibilities of what we have to do every day. Because that shifts our brain. We go from that right brain of awakeness and coming out of the dream state, which is one of the 4 states of consciousness I like to look at, going into this active consciousness. And then a lucid consciousness. Now, the active consciousness is that morning state when you feel good, you're remembering the dreams, you're waking up, you may roll over with your partner and engage, hopefully in sex, which is the best time to have sex. If you're going to have sex, have it in the morning, but if you're going to have an orgasm, have it at night. So I'll talk about that in a bit, and why we got to separate those two. But daydreaming with a purpose is what we're doing with visualization. It is looking at your desires and using these other brains. You have 50 to 60% of your heart is made of neural cells. The largest brain of your body is your instinctual brain. It is 5 times bigger than this. And so you can get a lot more done by trusting your feelings, by starting there. Now, instinct has 5 purposes: fight and flight, fear, attraction, and relaxation. So it's going to respond before this does. Now the problem we as a species have is we have an overdeveloped prefrontal cortex. We think too much. And because we do, we second guess ourselves and disconnect ourselves from our instinctual brain, which is designed to work faster. Remember, we're still mammals first. And until we remember that, we're going to follow what we are told to do. And that's when our culture and our religions, all of them, have given us sets of behaviors of how we to think and how we are to feel. So we disassociate ourselves naturally or unnaturally from that training. And so the work of a lot of ourselves is just getting ourselves out of that. What do I want? It's the hardest question we have to ask. And then usually when I ask that question, people start with, well, I don't want this. And I'm like, no, that's not what I asked you. What do you want? And then they're stuck because they have never asked themselves the question. So I say you've got to practice visualizing. And that is in that active morning space. What do I want? Don't listen to the thoughts. Listen to the feeling first. It's a feeling first. If you can start connecting with that. And gentlemen, you are better instinctually than women are. Because we are better rotely trained because of culture and religion. It's been harder on women. However, women have more orgasmic power and more ability to manifest once we have learned how to can reconnect with our bodies and reconnect with our sexuality. So daydreaming with a purpose is the first step we need to do. Now, I have to remind you that the brain does not know the difference from reality versus fantasy, which is why porn works so well, right? That hot chick is really there to deliver the pizza and have great sex with you. Your Peter meter will believe that. And so will your brain, because it'll go with the storyline, because we all love stories. I actually think there's a special place in hell for storytellers, because we will take you down many dark paths and creative paths that ought not to be. But the mind will follow whatever it sees or smells, and particularly memory comes from smell. Instinctually, our body can remember 20,000 smells. And so it'll bring up for us a memory that goes, oh yes, and an instinctual response to that memory. I also like to look at the brain as this lapidary, where you put rough stones in and it just churns them over and over again until you get a polished stone. And whatever thought you put in that lapidary, you manifest. So again, if it's a negative thought, eventually you'll manifest. And let me tell you, I'm on my way to Burning Man in Spain next month. And last year I was at the Burning Man in Africa Burn in South Africa. And I saw this example happen in our camp from two women who kept speaking about their concerns for safety. Now, Burning Man is hippie land. You know, we're all having a good time, drinking and smoking and cavorting about. And I never had those thoughts of having things, because we're all in tents and there's no really place to lock it up unless you've got your own RV and you brought that in. And out of a camp of 30 people, these two women who kept speaking of their fear, both of them were robbed. One woman had a laptop, beautiful Mac, with her partner's Mac in the same tent. But the fear-based woman had hers stolen and her partner's not. The other woman who had a cell phone in her purse sitting in a large room didn't take the purse but took the cell phone. And then I go, wow, funny how you can manifest very quickly. And there's a thing called the Schumann resonance, if you get a chance to look that up, that talks about the hertz that the planet hums at. And it's rising currently. So at particular spots on the planet, it is higher than other places. So Tibet is really high. Tibet is like the crown chakra where all the gurus go and they can levitate quite easily there. But at Burning Man's, they're also very high. And when you get over 21 hertz, things manifest much quicker. And so what you were doing, what is naturally happening on the planet, you are able to do within your own body. You bring your resonance up to a higher state of being because you have set a desire into place. And you've matched it with orgasmic energy, which always usually feels good. I don't know anybody who's had any pain orgasms in my life, but I know some orgasms that have come from lots of spanking, and you think that pain, but that's a whole nother story. But it does work, and you can get that joy and that feeling of, I like to call it the electrical volts from heaven, that makes the body get hit with endorphins and serotonin and oxytocin that we all need. So it is a system that works 24/7, and simply by visualizing and using not a picture, but a moving action of what you desire. It is the feeling. So it's not the picture of the red sports car, it's the feeling of you being in the red sports car driving you need to connect with. Does that make sense? Nod, please. Thank you. I can keep going. Okay, you can't ask me anything yet, so you gotta hold that thought. All right, so let me go to, now let's get to the important stuff, the sex. So, I have researched that there's 5 purposes for sex, right? Won't make you guess them, here they are. Pleasure, fun, it should be anyway. Connection or bonding. You get pheromones, it's like a cat. You know when the cat rubs on you, he's marking you. Same with sex. You give a semen deposit, you have just marked that partner. And guess what? They're going to be addicted to you now, fellas. That's the real reason why you want to wear a condom. Because the phone calls don't start until after you leave your pheromones within that person. And you thinking you can jet and go, I'm like, no. You done left your cooties now. They're stuck on you. So, you do leave your residue, and when you leave a connection, it is a chemical connection that happens with our bodies. Procreation, of course, that's how we got here. Healing is the other one, and particularly for men. This is an important skill that I hope men can start understanding, that they have to learn how to separate orgasm from ejaculation. So remember this. Orgasms for women are like waves. They start at the big toe and roll up the body and roll back down. For men, they're like volcanoes shooting out, right? However, when men have learned to separate orgasm from ejaculation, they can get the wave. Now, women's orgasms will last from 8 to 20 seconds, typically. Men only for 4 to 6 seconds. Anybody got any longer, fellas? You want to brag? Anybody got more than 6 seconds? Oh, all right. Just checking in. What y'all got? So, again, the goal is to hold the thought for 17 seconds. So for you to be able to last in that orgasmic energy, you've got to learn how to slow it down, right? As well as there's a practice of sexual healing that allows, particularly for men, that allows you to do edging, what we call, which is taking the orgasmic energy up to 80% and dropping it back down to 20%. And with each cycle of that, you heal a different part of the body. And if you're able to do that through 10 rounds of that, which I've still yet to find that gentleman, then you can open up psychic abilities. But it heals the circulatory system, the bones, the muscles, the endocrine, immune systems. It really does have a healing effect, but you've got to learn how to separate and let the body respond. So let me talk quickly about the problem with porn, because it disables that natural ability to heal. It moves too quickly. And this wasn't a problem until we got high-speed porn. And psychologists started noticing it when they got 20-year-olds coming in with erectile dysfunction. After watching porn for 6 years, they were already going through their sperm limits, and they couldn't get it up. And they couldn't sustain orgasm because, as there's a lovely little chart I saw on Facebook once, that 98% of the time you're looking at what porn will turn you on, and that last 2 minutes you find something finally and poof, it's done. But what it does is disconnects you from allowing you to get that wave, and it shortens that orgasm experience. And it kind of fries your brain and doesn't allow you to do what's natural, which is chase. And it's in that chase that you build these other areas of connection and bonding and pleasure with the partner. Now, ladies, I have to tell you that men will not know if they like you in a relationship until after they climax. because you smell differently. The sex drive in the masculine is so strong, it is constantly hitting them. And it is a pheromone that their bodies are responding to. So once they do, and once they get a climax, there is serotonin that's released in the back right side of the brain that allows you to smell differently, and they get their nose back. And all of a sudden, they either like you or they don't. And so ladies, it's up to you to choose better before you jump in the bed. Because you don't know until afterwards. And when they're talking to you afterwards and they don't fall asleep in 30 seconds, that's usually a good sign. So, but to pull that space out in between, and I don't do the rules of you gotta wait 3 months. I know my Tantra course here in town, they like saying 3 months before you engage sexuality. 3 months so it can build tension, it can build other emotions, it can let the instinct understand more of what that body that they're dealing with will give you. But sometimes you know, and I'll tell you my story about how I knew in a little bit. And then finally transmutation, which is what we're here to utilize. So now how? Activating lucid consciousness. So what do I mean by that? It is focus. Focus. So we're going to do a quick exercise, and we're going to see how long you can hold the thought for 17 seconds. Everybody close their eyes. Picture yourself at your favorite vacation spot. It is the favorite time of day, whether it's morning or night. See yourself, feel the heat, feel your body, get a physical sense and a memory of what you loved about that space. Now, couple it with a desire, whether it's work, whether it's love, whether it's money, whether it's a heart. Take that feeling and move it over to something you want. Everybody got it? Now hold it. Good. That's 17 seconds. Now your orgasms have to match that length. In order to do that, you gotta focus, which is difficult to do when you're humping and jumping and trying to find the right position, and you're so close, trying to get there. But focusing on that. Now, the subconscious mind is that when you're floating and you're daydreaming and you're really not paying attention, and don't do that while you're driving. But it allows you to, that space of daydreaming, it allows you to get back into it. So float, and allow your body to float. But when you want something and it's desire-driven, focus. Focus on it. Bring your emotional, instinctual body and sexual body back to that space. It's abundance, it's gratitude, it's emotions you want to feel. And I'm saying it's not the picture of the car, it's the feeling you have when you're in the car. You see the difference there? And it's that feeling you've got to bring into your body, so that your instinctual intelligence will resonate with it. Your sexual intelligence will go, yeah. And you will feel a little pulse. You should be sensitive enough to feel that little, oh, when you get that little, jump, right? When you feel that arousal jump, it's an electrical impulse that the body's responding to. Pay attention. This is all subtle energy work, but it is important and powerful, and you can strengthen it simply by doing some exercise. And I'm talking Kegeling, basic exercises with some, I will tell you though, I have some really cool crystals that are, these are man-made crystals called, and you've heard of tachyon energy. They look like, and these are inserted vaginally or anally. And then you do exercises, and it'll stimulate the prostate. But most importantly, they're not just quartz balls. They give off energy, and you will feel them as soon as they go in your body, and you go, oh. Because I've been using yoni eggs and jade eggs and rose quartz for some time. But when I put these things in, I went, uh-oh, something going on. There's something in here. There's something alive in here going on. So it's been an interesting shift to bring in technology into sexuality, and so that's what I'm going to be teaching about next.
Wow, okay.
Please, another round of applause. That was terrific, really interesting.